Hi, I'm Tava Singer from CaliQuiltCo.com, and today I'm going to show you how to sew Cuddle fabric and make a pillowcase. So we sell a lot of different kits on our website. Come check it out, and we include the pattern written by Shannon Fabrics. Wonderful. So this first one I'm going to start with is this autism awareness fabric. And we pre-cut all of our kits so you don't have to trim when you first get it. You can if you want to, but instead what we like is for you to take it straight to your dryer. We try to vacuum up all of the little cuddle dust before you get it. But it's one of those things that there still is some. As you can see, it's flying around a little bit. And so go ahead and throw it straight into your dryer on air or fluff, no heat, and let it dry. Or just let it fluff for five minutes or so. Do that and you'll get all the mess off, and then you can sew without wearing any of the cuddle fluff. Okay, so ordinarily I do a double row of pins when I'm sewing Cuddle, but for this one here I'm going to sew slower and use my stiletto and a longer stitch length, and so I have found that one row of pins is sufficient on this part here. I need to sew 2 seams. It's the 2 ends, or the sides, the top and the bottom side. Get that stretch just where I want it to be. And I like to start pinning from the front here and pin back. Ordinarily, that double row of pins, it acts as a basting stitch that you don't have to stitch. You can just use a pin. It's very handy, very, very clever. But I've found that when I'm sewing these and sewing slow, I don't need one. So I skip that step. Okay, so I bring it over to my machine, and ordinarily my machine defaults to 2.5 millimeters when I turn it on. And so with this, I want to increase my stitch length, and you can put it up to 3.5 or 4 millimeters. I like 4. You start with your fabric all the way underneath your presser foot. It helps the feed dogs to really grab onto this big, thick, plush fabric, and start sewing, and then you can back stitch to secure that first stitch. See how I'm sewing slower than I normally sew? My biggest reason for sewing slower when I'm sewing, this is called Cuddle 3, and it's the smooth Cuddle. By sewing slower though, I have the least amount of stretch possible, and this is the stretchiest of them all, at least for me. I don't know if the company says that, but I say that. So I like to go slow so I keep it nice and even. You always hear those horror stories of people who have had it stretch and they have to rip out a lot of seams, and it's hard to rip out because they had a tiny little narrow stitch, and you know, just those horror stories, and you just don't experience that when you sew this a little bit slower and you pin really well. Okay, first seam done. Trim that, clip my thread. And now my second seam. All the way underneath the presser foot, needle down, and now I'll back up. Perfect, second seam finished. Okay, so I'm going to show you something, and ordinarily I would never talk about this, but since it's a tutorial and I want to help make this as easy as possible, I'm going to show you an imperfection, okay? And it's an imperfection that would bother me in a lot of circumstances, but doesn't bother me at all with Cuddle. If you look at this, my seam is not totally perfect. There was a part where it got off. Well, I could see it better while I was sewing. Maybe now this angle. Hopefully you see it, okay? Here we go. This is better. Do you see how that's off? That doesn't bother me at all. That kind of thing bothers me a ton. If I'm quilting, if I'm sewing with cotton fabric, it bothers me a ton. But with Cuddle, it doesn't matter. And the biggest thing is no one is going to flip this inside out and examine your seams. And if they do, Okay? Like, there's lots of other things to be fussy about in life. Don't be fussy about that. But with this in particular, if that bothers you, you can trim that up really nice and neat and tidy with your rotary cutter, and you can do a zigzag. You're going to want to have a nice long stitch length and nice wide stitch. I like 5 and 5 or 4.5, as big as you can get it on your machine, and do a nice zigzag to finish this seam. Otherwise, it stays just like that, okay? This is a really sturdy, nice seam that we put in. We don't have to do anything more than that, and I don't, because I'm 45 years old, and in my whole life, I've never turned a pillowcase inside out to examine a factory stitching. Have you? Like, really, I haven't. And I haven't done it when someone has made me and gifted me a pillowcase either. A, I'm not looking for a problem, but B, it's like, who thinks to do that? And so in all reality, it's hard for me to let something go. I want it to be those finished polished seams like a burrito method, but burrito method does not work on Cuddle. They told me that, and I still had to try it anyway because I'm that person. Like, I just couldn't take their word for it because I love that polished look so much. But in this case, no one's going to see it. Let it be. Now I have the cuff, or your accent fabric, and with this I'm intentionally using a dimple because dimple is the stretchiest of them all, and I want to show you that if I can do this with dimple, you can do it too. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is turn it right sides together, and I'm going to sew the edge, sew it all together. Now, as much as I was just saying with that Cuddle 3, that a few pins, fewer pins than I normally use is just fine. With this one, I'm going to use a lot of pins because this is the stretchiest of them all. I'm going to go with my nice 4.0 stitch length. I'm using a stretch needle. These are all things that make Cuddle easier to sew. I'm using the walking foot because the walking foot is an even feed, a dual feed. Now on my FOF machine, it has an even feed or a dual feed that's built into the machine. It's not the same. I actually really prefer sewing on this Eversewn when I'm sewing Cuddle. But otherwise I will put a walking foot on my FOF. Every machine in different brands, some work better than others with Cuddle. And when it comes to sewing on dimple in particular, this one, I don't fight with it so much when I do this. So I get sewing, and I just back up a little bit. There we go. I go forward. That wasn't so scary or hard, was it? I hope not. Okay. I didn't think that was too scary. I'm having to do this in front of an audience here, right? Okay. Not too scary. All right. Take out my extra pins. And then I want to put this right side out and then fold it in half. So this is just such a different process than making a burrito pillowcase that I thought it was worth having its own separate tutorial to show you how I do it anyway. And so with this seam here, I like to mark it, and I put double pin there, and I like to find my other center. Okay, now instead of doing any other pinning right now, I just bring it right over to the cuff, or excuse me, to the body of the pillow. I'm going to match up those center parts inside here, tuck it all inside. And now I'm going to spend my time doing a lot more careful pinning. So I'm going to match up my first seam with the seam of one of the sides. I'll put both of my pins through, and I'll come down and do the other center with this seam here. And you don't have to put a double pin here for the center. I like to do it to get both sides of my seam allowance pinned down. I like that better. Not a must, it's just the way I like to do it. Okay, kind of shake it, get it flat, and now I start in the middle again. Line up one side of my Cuddle. Gotta find my next halfway point. I'm just making sure I line this up. It does not have to be exact. The coolest thing with Cuddle is it's such a forgiving fabric that if you have the most pristine, perfect seam, it doesn't show any differently as a little bit of a janky, jaggedy looking one. Like, those still look good too. You know, when we're quilting and we're sewing points, we never say, close is good. Not at all, right? We want it exact. But with Cuddle, close really is good. It's just, it's fun. Think of it as your casual sewing, I guess. Okay, so that was a ton of pins. Now I flip it over to do this side. I already got something stuck on it. There we go. Now with this again, I'm going to start in the middle. Shannon Fabrics, this is one of their new prints this year, this autism awareness. They did a really nice job, but the thing that I love so much about this particular brand, I mean, beyond the fact that they're really awesome people, like you want to find cool people to work with Shannon Fabrics, but what's really great is the quality. I became a fan long before I had a quilt shop. I became a fan just as, you know, sewing for my first kid and sewing for her. It was fun, and I wanted good fabric. And the thing is, we washed and washed and washed. I mean, that kid spit up more than any kid I've ever known. And so like we washed that stuff so many times, and it was still so soft and so vibrant and wonderful that I was using it for my third. Same exact blankets that I had made. It was fun. Well, except for, you know, her special ones that she didn't want to share. But that's a really good brand. That's hard. When it takes that much abuse, it still comes out soft and vibrant and beautiful. That's a good brand. So it's worth it. It can be tempting sometimes to see something that's cheaper at a big box store and want it, but quality is everything when you're sewing nice things. Quality is everything. Okay, so now for me, I like to just get right through the bulk, right out of the gate for this. So I'm going to bring this up. You can push up on your presser foot just to give you a little extra clearance. And I come over and start right on the bulkiest, hardest part to sew right away. Okay. All right, so I'll take out my first pins, needle down. Yes, and now I sew. And so I'm going to make sure that I have a little bit of tension right here, and I'm not going to back tack. I just want to get through that seam. And look at that, like butter. That wasn't even hard. Way more buildup than I needed for that. Okay. You can see right here that it's not matching up totally perfect, and I don't even care. It's totally fine. I would care about that for a lot of things, but not with this because it won't matter. Now, I'm going to use my stiletto to help push down on this as I get close. Let me pull those pins out. And I just want to make sure that these fabrics feed right under, which it did. If it didn't, I would stop. I would pop up my presser foot, help push it under, pop it back down. You don't want to let bulk build up with Cuddle. Now, as I approach the beginning, I'm going to actually clip these threads so that they don't get tangled up as I backstitch over this. Now I'm checking to make sure it fed under there. It did. Okay, see that time where it wanted to just build up? Grab my stiletto and help push it through. And then a little back tack. Okay, the third seam is complete. Now the fourth seam is actually totally optional, and it's up to you whether you want it or not. So let me show you. We get to actually turn this right side out. Let me get this out of the way a little bit. Right side out. We have a pillowcase. Okay, so it's completed now. I can just be done. I don't have to do anything more. Or what I can do is I can put it inside out one more time and I can go sew this part down. Now remember when I was first showing you how when I was sewing, it didn't match up totally perfect? And I was like, it's okay, it doesn't matter. Because genuinely, it doesn't matter, it is okay. But this is one of those times that if I actually go and top stitch this down, it actually helps to totally conceal that fabric too, which I think is a happy bonus. And often we finish a lot of Cuddle seams with doing zigzag. I really prefer a straight stitch on this, but it's up to you. For me, I actually don't like zigzags. So that's why I don't zigzag. So it's totally up to you. You may like it, go right ahead. I mean, to each their own. But I would rather see a straight stitch right here if I were going to do that. But actually with Cuddle pillowcases, I leave it just like this. I don't. So you have an optional fourth seam where you can sew that down, and you can do that with any color thread. It's fine, or you can match exactly what you're sewing. But for me, I leave it just like this and I call it good because this is how I like my pillowcases. So I'm Tava Singer with CaliQuiltCo.com, and this was the Cuddle pillowcase. And we sell kits, many to choose from, and we're always adding more. So please stop by. Thank you.